From there I can go.
Letter.
Okay, sounds good. My name's Isaiah Toms, and this is my story in 7. So I grew up in a very strong Christian family. Obviously, a lot of y'all know my dad. So my whole mom's side of the family goes to the same church, and we're all very heavily involved. So that's really all I knew growing up. And it wasn't until I got to high school that I started to struggle with my identity. And so, I had a whole lot of expectations and stress that I put on myself when it came to sports, and especially as I got into high school and into varsity sports, I continued to put this pressure on myself, and I wanted to plan out how everything was going to go, and I wanted to, I put so much stock in my performance that it just really hurt. I just continued to hurt myself mentally. I looked for validation from others, and I was looking for just acceptance from others through them thinking that I was good at sports or that I was cool. And so that was something that I struggled with throughout high school, but I still had my faith to fall back on, so it wasn't really that bad. And then it wasn't until I got into, starting my senior year, and I had some things happen, and I really just dove into the world and dove into looking for validation through all these different things, whether it was partying or girls or all these different things, and then sports as well continued. And so that's something that I struggled with for probably a year and a half that continued to go on. And then I got into college and just continued to struggle with those same things in college, and in college it's even more amplified. It gets even worse. And so I just continued to kind of search for who I was. And it wasn't until I got to the spring that I really felt, now I can look back and know that the Lord showed me a lot of grace, because he helped me to understand that I needed him and that I needed help. So I started to seek him. I started to seek read my devotional more and all this different stuff. And he slowly worked on my heart. And for once I had a peace and a joy that I hadn't felt in a long time. And so I knew that was from him. And so starting last summer, I started to get into, reading my Bible more and writing and talking to him and all these different things. So I continued to grow in my faith, yet that turned into me being very lukewarm, because yes, I was seeking the Lord and he was giving me understanding and knowledge and joy and all these things through that, but I was still stuck in my old ways. So that continued into the fall, and it wasn't until Anna asked me to be a G group leader that really forced me to dive back into the Word like I should have been all along. And so I was leading this Bible study group, yet I was still living in the world and still doing these things that I knew that I shouldn't. And I had a lot of conviction, but I could never let those things go. And it wasn't until I just really felt the Lord working on me and telling me that, I was this influence, and I had a chance to preach the gospel and lead this Bible study and be a representation for Christ, but I was being a bad representation. So that set me on a course of trying to, dive back into his word, like I said, and I started to finally cut those things out that I should have been. And it was a struggle. It was hard, and I feel like everybody goes on that journey. But, the Lord was giving me understanding and giving me his wisdom through that time. So I continued to grow in my faith throughout a couple months. And it wasn't until January that there was a time where I just finally felt the Lord calling me to drop the sin that there were a couple things that I was still holding on to. He was calling me to drop those things, pick up my cross, and follow him. And that was huge for me, and it just really, really turned my life around. And so through that happening, it was like for once I felt the true connection to Jesus that I had never felt before, that I didn't even know was possible. And it was a freedom from all the things in life that I struggled with and that I worried about, because I knew that I had a higher purpose and that I had a higher calling. So none of these things could really get me down anymore, because I have who I look to, and that's Jesus. And so through that, and that was the moment where it was like it went from my parents' faith to my faith for once. And I truly knew what it meant to be a follower of Christ. And so from that point on, I've just continued to grow in my faith. The Lord has continued to work on my heart. And for one, I started off and I thought, okay, well now I'm finally walking with the Lord, and I've cut these things out that I should have all along. And so now I'm good. And that is not the case at all. The Lord has continued to work on my heart. He showed me things that I struggle with, that I'm bad at, that I need to fix. And so it's been a journey of changing those things. But I've never felt the sense of peace and the sense of joy and freedom that I do now that I'm walking with the Lord.